I'm thinking of, I think it's a Dennis Miller had a joke right after Napster when, who was it? Steely Dan won Album of the Year, and he made a joke that their album sales jumped only because all their fans were too old to know how to download it for free. And it was like 10 years after Napster before, or longer, before it really felt like the record business figured out digital in any way, shape, or form. It was a long slog. And so I'm curious as to whether, as technology makes things faster, is it possible that the industry can figure out whatever is to draw the parallel with coronavirus to live? Will it take that long for the music business to figure out what that solution is for revenue to replace the live circuit?
All of Ash's programmers are sitting at home with nothing better to do than continue to hammer away at his site. So I guess I guess we're going to be all right. I'm almost thinking that maybe a record label started this thing. What the heck?
Yeah. So actually, we have a lot of our team is in the U.S., but we do have some of our programmers are in Belarus, and it's pretty wild what the president of Belarus recently said about the virus. It's pretty incredible when you look at what's going on country to country. Obviously, some countries are treating it the same. The Belarus president, I read, and maybe he's changed it in the past couple of weeks. He was like, we don't need to do anything. It's better to, and I don't agree with what this disclaimer, okay? So I do not agree with what the Belarus president said. He goes, it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees, and all we need is saunas and vodka, and we're not stopping for nothing. Wow. And then you look at what's going on in Venezuela. We got a $15 million bounty on the president of a civilized country by us. Drug trafficking. That's insane, dude. Like, wow. So it's crazy what's going on around the world. But yes, we have a team that is working diligently, and hopefully we're going to be able to unveil it this year. And one interesting thing that came up with all the people involved, it was like, oh, we should scramble and just launch the beta and go because, live streaming. I go, guys, we're not changing the strategy of how we roll this out because of COVID-19. The coronavirus is here to remind us our mission and why it's so important. The disaster we're facing from a business standpoint is the ultimate vindication for what we've been saying for the past few years as I tried to go and raise money to do this, because I've never done a full-on tech venture, and it's a very expensive business. And one of the best ways to blow all your money is doing a startup. So I have to be incredibly calculated and careful to not make a big mistake. But a lot of them thought we should just scramble to go. I go, no. This is just a reminder and a vindicator. This is not a strategy changer to rush. I go, Twitch exists. There's other things, there's Instagram Live, there's YouTube Live. There's other places they can do that. Live streaming is just one small component of the overall mission that we're doing. But yeah, I mean, there's a high level of panic and urgency from all angles of trying to figure out what to do. I saw Triller just announced like this massive online music festival with like huge rappers and a bunch of pop stars, and that'll be interesting to see how many people tune in. But again, it's like the solution isn't just like, oh, now we can live stream. I actually believe there is a delusional level with how people think there's this insane appetite for live music on the internet pre-COVID-19. I've sat with some other companies that are already going, some companies that are publicly traded that are in the live music video business. And I don't think there is that big of a demand for that. And maybe COVID changes that to a degree. But the challenge is, this one company was like, oh, well, we're like the ESPN of live music. And they were very bullish. I go, I'm sorry, but that model's not real. And they go, what are you talking about? They're like, Beyonce at Coachella streamed millions and millions. And it was just huge. I go, yeah, that was an incredible performance. And it is one of the biggest artists in the world at the biggest festival in the world. I was like, there's also a level of anomaly in general. I go, right now, a teenage girl that grew up homeschooled by her progressive parents in LA is the hottest act in the world. Do you know how many other parents have a teenager who they think should be the biggest act in the world? It's the exception to the rule. Live music, going to the event is amazing. Listening to a recording the way the artist intended it in a studio is amazing. Live streaming a concert, well, yes, it's cool. It's not this game-changing scenario because the audio recording is not as good as the studio version, and the experience isn't as great as actually being there. So they go, yeah, but it's the ESPN of live music. You don't get it, Ash. I go, no. You don't get it. Because here's the difference between watching sports on ESPN. Every game, even if it's the same two teams playing against each other, every game's different. I love Guns N' Roses. They play hundreds of shows. How different is each set list? Yeah, they switch out songs here and there. They ain't switching out 30 songs. It's not a completely different show date to date. You know, an artist set at Download Festival versus their set at Sonic Temple, yeah, there'll be changes, but it ain't going to be changes that you see in sports games.
Well, if they're not going on tour, they've got all the time in the world to figure out all those songs and readjust their set lists.
Well, one of the things, I'm sorry, Mike, what I was going to say is just that Ashley brought up this great point about the idea that live streaming is not the be-all, end-all. Now, I'm spending a lot of time because I always have worked from home. I always will, pop on the TV with whoever's live streaming. What I've found interesting is that there are artists who I know would pack theaters and were huge 10, 15, 20 years ago who had almost no online presence, and they do a live stream because they're stuck in a room and there's 4 people there along with me. And then there's somebody else who couldn't bring in half as many people 10, 15, 20 years ago, but has been really active digitally. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people there every time they turn on their camera. And so it really, to me, kind of exposed that idea that it isn't just like, okay, once a year I'm going to pop on. It really is an investment. But then again, it's like, is the payoff even worth it? I mean, Mike, you got a perspective on that at all?
Well, I mean, look, this conversation turned drastically different than what I was expecting, which is one.
Oh, go back to the script. I'm sorry.
No. This is great. I think it's educational. I mean, the interesting thing to me, right? Like, I don't know, but there was a point in time that people were saying, well, you can't ever replace an album. A piece of vinyl with the artwork that goes along with it, with the, the groove and the feel of the analog, that was the only way for them to experience whatever they were experiencing, right? And that's because there was an idea of how that got ingrained to them when they were a certain age. And so to me, look, I agree. I don't think that we're going to, in 2020, COVID or not, replace live shows with live streams. I do think that there will continue to be emerging technologies that allow us to experience everything differently, right? Like, as soon as I can, interact, if I get into a VR where I'm not having to wear a headset necessarily, but, RIP Google Glass, but wear something that's a little less ridiculous, and I get to choose my own adventure in a set, right? Like, I bought season tickets to a soccer team once, and the best thing about it was going down to figure out what seat I wanted to sit in. Put on a pair of goggles, and I could sit in any seat in the house and figure out what I was willing to pay based on that view. That was something that as a kid, I would have never thought was possible, right? How awesome would it be if Ash has got a new release by Palais Royale and, go back to Choose Your Own Adventure books. Somehow through this video, I can choose whether or not I'm in the car with the band. I haven't seen the video, so I don't know if there's a car, but the promo shot looks good and there's a car there, or I'm the singer of the band, right? So to me, there's so many things that are possible. I don't know if any of these are in the works. I have to imagine that, some of them are. So I don't know if that answers your question. Ultimately, what I always try to do, right, is I'm hopeful that the industry will continue to adjust and adopt. I think, Paul, you are correct in the fact that things will get sped up, right? Unless who knows what happens next? You know, Ash is talking about shows not happening because of laryngitis. Well, they also, some of them weren't happening because of, you know, terrorist attacks. What happens if something crazy happens and it takes out the internet, right? We are in a very fortunate position that we're being asked to stay at home, and I can sit here with, you know, two of my favorite people in the world and do this. If I was forced to not be able to do that, right, because technology didn't exist or the internet went out and all of a sudden I'm back to doing something like reading books, I might go crazy.